शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तव जय गाथा, जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे, जय 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 हे।
भारत माता की
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and members of the press, on behalf of our Memorial Museum and Library and Group of Publications India, I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you to the launch and book discussion on Reset, Regaining India's Economic Legacy by Dr. Subramanian Swamy. I'd like to welcome the Honorable former President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee. It's an honor to have you amongst us today. I'd now like to invite Shri Shakti Sinha, Director, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, to say a few words.
Honorable Shri Pranab Mukherjee, former President, or as likes to style himself on Twitter, Citizen Mukherjee, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, members of Parliament, Mrs. Swamy, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Looking at this humongous crowd, you know that Dr. Swamy's reputation and his knowledge of economics has brought you all here. It's so good to have former President with us. His knowledge and analysis of Indian political and economic developments will last 4 decades plus. Exactly what happened in 72 when the elections were held in Bengal Assembly, down to today. He's always phenomenal, I think, knowledge of and ability to explain the developments. So that on an occasion like this, when Dr. Swamy, who's been arguing for a set of economic policies since the early 70s that I remember when he was at IIT, Delhi, to now, and Mr. Mukherjee here, and this promises to be a very, very good evening. All I want to say is, okay, 2 quick things. One, we feel that we feel vindicated when we get books discussed, books on any subject of contemporary relevance to India. Because at the end of the day, institutions like this are meant to provide a platform, all kinds of issues, different points of view. Nothing prescriptive, we don't have any point of view of our own. We just have to provide a platform to facilitate dialogue, discussion, argument, hopefully within the parliamentary parameters of language. And the last is a very small request, please put off your mobile phones. Please put it on silent mode. It does disturb. With that, let me join our friends from Rupa on behalf of Nehru Memorial to welcome all of you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Kapish Mehra, Managing Director, Rupa Publications India, for the publisher's address.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. First of all, a very good evening to former President, Shri Pranab Mukherjee ji, the man of the evening, Shri Subramanian Swamy, Dr. Sinha, Mrs. Swamy, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish all book launches were like this. I wish every book we published had this kind of a reception. And I wish that every book that came out in the Indian publishing scene had the kind of enthusiasm that this book has received from the day that it has been released. Many, many kudos to Dr. Swamy. for an outstanding work. We are privileged at Rupa to have had the opportunity to publish this book. It is very rare, ladies and gentlemen, that a book on the day of its release function goes in for a reprint. And it was my good fortune that I signed it today. It is rare in the world of publishing, especially in our nation, where the number of readers are what they are, that the sales department of a publishing company has a headache of lack of copies rather than extra copies. There is very rare a situation that you get booksellers from different parts of the country calling in and saying, talking about a book and asking when is it going to be released. And certainly it is very, very rare that a publisher is more enthused than anybody else about a particular book simply because of the author and the kind of following that he has. I'm not supposed to be speaking on the subject, simply because I am no expert. But I certainly wish, like the title of Dr. Swamy's book, there was a button of reset. If we could press it every time in our lives where things weren't what they should be, life would be so much simpler. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we need books like these. This is not just important to reflect, debate, discuss, while all of those things are wonderful for the stage of a Nehru Memorial, to whom I have a great deal of thanks to convey to being a partner for this event. But I think what we need is a bit more than debate and discussion. I think we need acceptance. I think we need to take some firm decisions, and for that sometimes the abolishment of the comfort zone is more important than the abolishment of 370. While that is not for me to comment on beyond a certain point, it is certainly something for us as publishers that we are proud of, and we feel that this is probably, or unfortunately may I add, the right time for a right book. Unfortunately, the wrong time for the nation. With these words, many congratulations to Dr. Swamy, and once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for gracing us with your presence today. One last small 30-second anecdote before I leave. While Dr. Swamy has, for constitutional reasons out of respect, wished for Dr. Mukherjee to release the book today, I have a selfish interest. It is a superstition in the world of publishing that if a successful author from your stable releases the book of another author, it is bound to be an outstanding success. For us at Rupa, we have had the privilege of publishing Honorable Former President's 3 books, and we are in the course of publishing the 4th one, and all of them have been outstanding successes. So when I got the privilege of inviting him, I thanked my stars and hoping that not only will this turn out to be a success, but an outstanding one. And as we can see from the gathering here, it so has done. So thank you, sir, for gracing us today and agreeing to release this book. And once again, best wishes to Dr. Swamy.
Thank you, Mr. Mehra. And before the official release, I would like to request Dr. Subramanian Swamy to say a few words.
Mukherjee, who is not only being the President of India, but is now decorated as Bharat Ratna of India. I met Pranab in the late 60s when he was a young member of Parliament, and then been in touch with him all these years. I had the pleasure of knowing him in a sense as a cabinet colleague when P.V. Narasimha Rao had given me a cabinet rank position and the most senior most minister was Pranab Mukherjee. I remember Narasimha Rao telling me that I'm going to appoint you, but first I must get clearance from Pranab Mukherjee. Only if he agrees, I'm going to appoint you. And so that was the first occasion when I found Pranab Mukherjee's immediate reaction, and that's how I became an associate of Narasimha Rao's government. Later on, although I've been to Parliament 6 times, elected 5 times, but the 6th time, this time, I was nominated to Parliament, and the signature was of Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. And when I went to meet him as a courtesy call, he said, "It's a great pity you haven't written a book on economics recently." And so I am fulfilling my promise to you that I will write a book. And this book is an outcome of that, and that's why I was insistent that we should try first to invite you to release the book. I also have to thank Rupa Publishers, because I had so many schedules. I had to go to court, I had to travel around the country, I had parliamentary duties, I was not finding time. But Rupa has some fierce ladies who get after you. There was one particular dragon lady who kept after me to make me meet my schedule. And this function today is also being organized by another young lady of the Rupas, and so I have to thank Rupa for making this possible. Broadly, while we have a panel discussion, I would say that I'll make 3 or 4 general comments. The title Reset is appropriate because we have had 3 occasions when we have reset our policies and made a big difference, both negatively and positively. First was after we got freedom, post-47. And then it was in post-1990 when first Mr. Chandrasekhar for a brief period and then Mr. Narasimha Rao as Prime Minister made a clean break with the past by officially scrapping controls and licenses in almost in a day's time. And while from 1947 to 1990, when we were following the Soviet socialist model, our growth rate was only 3.5% per year. But during the period of Narasimha Rao's tenure, we rose from that low level all the way in 5 years continuously till we reached 8% per year. And that was the first time India believed that we can grow, because somehow the idea was sold that 3.5% per year is the Hindu rate of growth and we will never ever be able to exceed that. That was proved during that period, and that reset was a major reset. Since then, in 2014, we have had an attempt at reset, but that has been much more in the micro level and the personal initiative of the Prime Minister. But the macro level, where we have, in my opinion, not performed, and that is why we're seeing the decline today, and therefore we need a new reset in this year, 2019, and latest by February 2020. I also would like to say that what this country needs is a 10% per year growth rate. And that is within reach. We have the potential for it. We have a very large savings rate that is inefficiently used in the investment field. And we have a young population. In fact, we have a youngest population of the large countries, certainly compared to the United States, Europe, Japan, and China. We have a much younger population. In fact, 70% of our population is below the age of 35, and therefore innovation is much more possible when a country has a young population. So therefore, unless we target a 10% growth rate, it will not be possible to eliminate unemployment within 10 years. And therefore, how that can be done is my last chapter. I have also added a chapter that pure material progress will not make us happy. We need to blend both spiritual values and with the economic progress, material progress. But that's a last chapter as a tribute to Dindayal Upadhyaya, who came up with the concept of integral humanism. But it's not an essential part of my text. My text is, towards the end, I'm saying the reset would be such that we will strive to achieve a 10% growth rate for a period of 10 years. And how that can be done will be part of the panel discussion. But today I'm expressing my gratitude to all of you. You come. I frankly was not expecting such a turnout. Otherwise we would have got a bigger auditorium. But even this auditorium, I'm told, very often is not filled. So therefore all of you have come. I'm particularly personally grateful. And I look forward to hearing our former President and Bharat Ratna, Dr. Pranab Mukherjee. Thank you very much.
May I now request Dr. Pranab Mukherjee to kindly release the book. May I request Mr. Kapish Mehra to join us on stage for the release. So we request you to say a few words.
Before your request, I came. Good evening. Dr. Subramanian Swamy, Member of Parliament, Sri Shakti Sinha, Director, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, Publisher Kapish Mehra, my distinguished colleague, Lord Darshan ji, sitting in the audience, and many other long faces, because more than often I come to this podium in the last 2 years since my retirement from the office of the 13th Presidency of the Republic. And on many occasions, it has been on the book release function. I take pleasure when I find someone is coming out with his ideas in the form of book, as book has some sort of permanency, like the editorial or co-editorial pages writings. After all, book is preserved with more care than the newspaper articles are treated with. Dr. Swamy is a, if I say, old friend and also old adversity since I knew him. Because one characteristic I must tell you very frankly and candidly, what he feels, he speaks out. Unlike many others, he does not repeat. And what he believes, he is not afraid to declare it openly, publicly, in the matter of publicity also. One small incident coming to my mind, it was in the 80s, first half of 80s of the last century, when I was the finance minister, under Mrs. Indira Gandhi. I was in the office of the finance ministry in January 1982, and just 3-4 weeks before that, not 4 weeks, I think roughly about 3 or 3.5 weeks before that, the then Finance Minister, Mr. Venkatraman, who also became the President of the Republic, and also Vice President, he as Finance Minister entered into an extended funding facilities of a hefty $5 billion SDRs, not US dollar. And perhaps that is the largest amount of loan under this scheme, extended funding facilities, from IMF at that point of time. But whether I don't know the exact reason, but perhaps I was a supporter of the proposal and very strongly advocated in the cabinet and also outside of Mr. Venkatraman. There was a cabinet reshuffle, and from finance he was shifted to defense, and I came from commerce to finance. And the entire debate, IMF loan, I was the focal point and I had to face. The movement, and everybody said, even I am not mentioning the name, but a test member went to the extent of suggesting that this year we have no interest in the budget, because we know the budget will be dictated by IMF. And that was the general sense, particularly amongst a section of the opposition. But when I presented the budget, and that was my, if I say so, it was my modern budget, because it was in 1982-83. At the end of the budget, many of my colleagues came to my wife about me, and when I saw Dr. Swamy coming forward, I was a little surprised that would you like to consider a straight on my face, but you extended a very wide hand and you say, whatever be the budget, I am not giving any objective right now. That I will articulate and say when I speak on budget, I have done member of Lok Sabha. As you know, member of Raj Sabha, and surprisingly, nominated by me as president, and he continues the I am retired. So Dr. Swamy came and said that whatever be the character of your budget, I can say it is not IMF budget. And when he said these things, just few weeks before the adjournment of the House, budget was presented, House was to be adjourned, Speaker was waiting, that further congratulations, members are coming, Prime Minister congratulated, formalities, and others were coming and expressing their views, and were shaking hands. So 2 minutes the House continued, and after that the House was adjourned. These are referring to that what he feels, he speaks. What he believes, he speaks. This is to my mind a sterling quality of any politician. And I appreciate that. Not only on that occasion, but on many occasions later on, because mostly, except on another occasion where he officially helped me, that was he has referred to in the book also. He was Commerce Minister during Chandrasekhar's Prime Ministership, and that ministry did not last long. Reasons I am not going into. But he was, as a Commerce Minister, prepared some elaborate plan, and one of the objective was the liberalization of the trade policy. In 1995, when as leading Commerce Minister, I signed the Marrakesh Agreement and made India a founding member of the World Trade Organization. Like IMF loan, though I was not the author, But here I was the author because I led the Indian delegation to Marrakesh where the final WTO agreement was signed. As many of you are aware, particularly the students of economics, I described it as the missing third leg of a tripod. Because after the Second World War, when the international community and the world leaders started thinking of rebuilding and resetting the economy, which was devastated and completely destroyed, whole of Europe, large part of Africa and Asia, because Japan was also involved in the Second World War, USA was involved. So the world leaders assembled together to reconsider how the world economy could be brought back to health. So IBRD, popularly known as World Bank, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IMF, International Monetary Fund, were established. But the third organization, to bring discipline and restore the health of the international trade, that was opposed by US Senate, and so it could not be materialized. So we had to wait for almost 50 years, from 1945 to 1995, to get the third missing leg of the tripod, and international trade was brought under discipline, under a set of rules, covering a large area, agriculture, textiles, and most important, IPR. And then there was a very bitter criticism of mine, and I remember it was 15th of April 1995, when the agreement was signed, and it was to be effective from the next year, I'm sorry, not 95, 94, and it was to be operated from 1st of January 95. So, I was really at the center of the storm. But he openly supported. And not only supported me, as he has mentioned in his book, and referred to his observation also, that a committee was set up under his chairmanship with the rank of a cabinet minister. And that committee was to look into the details and particularly the points of criticism for IPR and others. One of the recommendations which he made, and which many of his, you will agree, those who are assembled here, and those who know the things, that the development of the Indian pharmaceutical industries is mainly because we accepted IPR. And that was the area where we are criticized most. But in his note and in his advice, he gave to me that because for a short while I was brought in the cabinet by PV. When he became Prime Minister, I was in the Planning Commission as Deputy Chairman. After some time he brought me back to Commerce Ministry and then to External Affairs. And as Commerce Minister I signed the WTO agreement. Therefore the short point which I am trying to drive at, that what he feels he speaks, and what he speaks definitely he will write and he has written. I am just not passing any judgment on the book in the sense, because it is the prerogative of the readers. As a reader I do feel I will form my opinion, not being biased by eloquent support or vehement opposition. I will have to form my views after going through the texts, reading the book, cover to cover, then only we can make justice. But my last point is, again I will thank him for his wisdom. He has not made the book unusual long, and his style of writing is so lucid that it never makes one bored and stop the reading. Once you start the reading, if you have time, you will like to finish from cover to cover. With these words, I thank him once again for bringing out his thoughts in book, in printed form, and have been available to the people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.
We are grateful to the Honorable former President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee, for his time and valuable insights. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing the occasion.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I request you to please clear the way for former President of India to leave. I request you to please clear the doorway. We'll be beginning the panel discussion shortly. Please bear with us for a few minutes as we reset for the second part of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin. May I please request you to take your seats? As we move on into the panel discussion, I'd like to welcome Mr. Rahul Shankar, Editor-in-Chief at Times Now, who will be moderating today's discussion. I'd also like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Sanjay Babu, political commentator, policy analyst, author. Dr. Babu was the former Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He also served former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh as his media advisor and chief spokesperson. We also have with us Dr. Anil Venkatesh. He is one of India's leading chartered accountants who addresses the business concerning relating to commercial and economic laws, economic policies and business strategies. He has also authored several books on these subjects. Thank you so much. I'm over to you, Mr. Rahul Shankar now.
Great. Okay. Shall we? Yes. Everyone's audio coming through?
Yes, 1, 2, 3. Yes, I think so.
I guess so. Is it?
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I haven't really seen this particular auditorium this packed. So, once again, thank you very much for being here this evening to grace this occasion. I want to begin by saying that over the last few years, some people have been describing the state of affairs, the economic state of affairs, using some adjectives. Slow down, slide. Some people have even uttered the dreaded recession, R word. Till now, however, the ruling establishment has chosen to dismiss these criticisms in the main, as motivated by the opposition and certain economists of a particular bent of mind which are uncomfortable with the policies and the approach of this government. But today marks a very different day, because someone from within the ruling establishment has used some novel adjectives to describe the state of affairs. One of them is a two-letter word called tailspin. Dr. Subramanian Swamy fleshes out the reasons why he is called the present state of affairs tailspin in this book, Reset. But more than just assessing the problems, Dr. Swamy has called upon his scholarship, which has been, of course, steeled in some of the greatest institutions in the world, and he has brought his wisdom to bear on offering, as he calls it, a reset, or the formula for a reset to regain India's economic legacy. And I want to begin this discussion by touching upon some of the points that Dr. Swamy has made in his very informative book, which is a must-read. Now I want to begin, Dr. Swamy, not from the extant moment, from a little back in time. In your book, you talk about the 1991 reforms.
Yes.
And you've taken credit for them. You've said that you were the initiator, you conceived it in 88, and then having helped the Chandrasekhar government and the Narasimha Rao government take it forward and fully implement it at a time when you held a cabinet rank. Now, conventional wisdom, or at least that's the more advertised thesis, is that two other individuals, P.V. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh, were the initiators. So tell us a little bit about your contribution first. This is very important.
Well, P.V. Narasimha Rao was not in the Chandrasekhar government, so the blueprints were really produced during the Chandrasekhar government, when it was adopted by the cabinet on March 11th at 11 a.m. of 1991. And at 4 p.m. the government fell. Not because of my blueprints, but there was a quarrel between Chandrasekhar and Rajiv Gandhi, who was extending support to our government. When Narasimha Rao was invited to form the government, and as the biography of Sitapati says, on the way back from Rashtrapati Bhavan to his Motilal Nehru Marg residence, he stopped by at my place and took me with him to Motilal Nehru Marg. And then he told me that you have produced some blueprints, I want them now. I said, when? He said, tonight. I said, tonight I'll have to dig up for it, but I'll try my best. And I managed to find it. I gave it to him. Then he said I should join his cabinet. I said, I'll be delighted to. But he said, there's a condition, and that is that you must join Congress party. So I said, that I will not do. So he said, why? I said, because you're not the owner of the Congress party, you're just a tenant. and the owner is someone else. So he laughed off and said, all right, in due course I'll find some other way to bring you in. But Narasimha Rao consulted me throughout. When I was, when Chandrasekhar's government was formed, Chandrasekhar asked me who should be the economic advisor to our government. So I said the best person would be Manmohan Singh. He said, why? I said, he is, first of all, professionally very qualified. And two, he will not talk back to you. So therefore, that is the best kind of expert you can have for your kind of temperament, I said. So he said, get him. So I phoned him up, he was in Geneva, and he agreed to come. He made only one condition, that I should make Mantek Singh Secretary of Commerce, of which I was a minister, which I agreed. And I must say that both Mantek Singh and Manmohan Singh assisted me in a great deal. And so the only credit I can claim is that I initiated it as the political authority to push it. I got it adopted by the cabinet. But the 95% of the credit should go to Narasimha Rao, because he had the nerve and the guts to take it through, explain to his Congress members that he wasn't doing anything extraordinary, and he had a gift of the gab, so he was able to do it. And of course, Manmohan Singh was faithfully executing it, but he was very unhappy because he was attacked in Parliament. I've seen him almost in tears in front of Narasimha Rao, saying that I'm attacked every day. And Narasimha Rao said, blame it on me, that is him. And so Narasimha Rao took the flak, and I think that he suffered it, because after his tenure was over, the Congress party set up an inquiry committee under Anthony, and they found fault with the policies pursued by Narasimha Rao, because Congress party lost the election in 1996 after this huge success in the economy. So, short answer to your question is, the major credit should go to Narasimha Rao. For execution, Manmohan Singh and Mantek Singh. And in terms of conception, I'm responsible.
It's very interesting. So it's the first time we're hearing, actually, forgive me for my illiteracy in these matters, but it's the first time we're hearing that it was actually your recommendation that led to Dr. Manmohan Singh being invited into government. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, he was economic advisor in our government. And and Narasimha Rao must have asked many other people, not only me. I believe he asked a former principal secretary to the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi also, who was a governor of Bombay. And he asked a lot of people. And I think there was a very large opinion in favor of Manmohan Singh.
Well, I'm going to be a little mischievous.
Yes.
There is another man who's also given credit, and that man is currently in jail. Here's what Dr. Manmohan Singh said about the man at an event in August 2013. He said, I, quote, Sri Chidambaram and I were cabinet colleagues in Sri Narasimha Rao's government when I was finance minister, and the reforms of the 1990s were initiated. I recalled that Sri Chidambaram was one of the strongest advocates of economic reforms whenever the program came under attack, both in the Union cabinet and also in the wider political arena. Does he deserve any credit, P. Chidambaram?
Well, I know this much, that from the late 70s, the whole of the 80s, and the early 90s, Chidambaram and N. Ram used to edit a magazine called The Radical View.
That I'm aware of.
And they were advocating nothing but nationalization, state control, commanding heights of the... I think Chidambaram saw the trend of the reforms, and then he did a somersault. But he milked the system. If he really had brought about serious economic reforms, nobody can milk the system.
Let me bring in Professor Baru for just a few moments.
Yeah,
and I want to ask you, because in your book, The Accidental Prime Minister, which I've also read, you have a lot of praise for Dr. Manmohan Singh and his role in the 1991 reforms, and generally as an economist. Are you fully in concurrence with what Dr. Swamy is saying about his own contribution and the shepherding of the reform process or the executing of it very diligently by Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Well, I wrote another book, which a gentleman here has just brought called 1991, How Narasimha Rao Made History. In fact, that book is about 1991. The Accidental Prime Minister is about 2004, 2009. But in my book, which I wrote on the basis of substantial conversations I had with several people, including Mr. Swamy, I make 2 points on this whole issue of the authorship of 1991. One, it is true that the March 91 budget of the Chandrasekhar government had almost everything that was there in the July 1991 budget of Dr. Manmohan Singh. That is on record. In fact, even Yashwant Sinha, who was the finance minister during Chandrasekhar's time, has written a book where he has given details of that. And the program with the fund, which was finally entered into in 91, the negotiations began in December 91. It just so happened that I was in Washington as a journalist of the Economic Times and ran into C. Rangarajan, who was the deputy governor, who was actually in Washington on a secret mission to negotiate the terms of the agreement. So it is true that the Chandrasekhar government began the process and it finally culminated during Mr. Narasimha Rao's time. But the important point that needs to be made, and which Dr. Swamy has repeatedly made even in this book, is that the political leadership that Narasimha Rao gave was an extremely important factor that facilitated the reform. Economists, and I come from the tribe of economists, we economists try to apportion blame or claim responsibility by giving various economists the credit for what was done in 91. But I think it's important, and that's what I did in my book on 1991, to give the political credit, because whatever ideas individuals may have, at the end of the day in a democracy, the head of the government has to take those ideas through Parliament and get the support of the Parliament, which is what Narasimha Rao did. The second minor issue is a correction, which is that, and I have recorded this in my book based again on fairly well-informed facts, that Narasimha Rao first reached out to Dr. I.G. Patel. He may well have done that after speaking to Dr. Swamy, but I know for a fact that Narasimha Rao asked I.G. Patel to become the finance minister, and it was I.G. who declined his offer on the very simple grounds that he had, after living in Delhi, London and New York for most of his life, he had finally built a house in Baroda and settled down there, and he said, I'm not coming back to Delhi. It takes a lot of wisdom and courage, I guess, to simply turn down the offer of the job of the finance minister of India, but IG did, and that is when Dr. Manmohan Singh was made the offer. But I agree with the basic argument of Dr. Swamy,
right,
that the reform of 91 started in the Chandrasekhar government, and he was very much involved in that, and continued and implemented finally by the Narasimha Rao.
Well, Dr. Baru, you make an important point about the will, the political will. Now, I just want to read, if you permit me.
Yes.
The private members' business resolutions. This was introduced in the Rajya Sabha by Dr. Swamy. List of business, Friday, 5th August 1988, 11 a.m. Now pay attention to what I'm going to say, because you would think that we are still in 1991. What was one of the important resolutions that he wanted to push through? Generate a growth rate of 10% per year by placing more emphasis on agriculture, employment generation, and ensuring optimum utilization of available resources through the effective use of market forces and fiscal policy. Many people will say today, those same conditions, or lack thereof, exist, which are frustrating India's inevitable ambition to reach double-digit growth. So I'll just come back to that, but on the point of political leadership, I want to once again refer to your book, Dr. Swamy. You draw a contrast between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Dr. Manmohan Singh. And while you praise the former, you also add that you have a fundamental problem with the approach adopted by the people he's surrounded by. Would you, first of all, tell me what the issue is, because most of the people he's been surrounded by are individuals who have come from abroad, have great on paper qualifications, and have been very effective administrators. So I would like you to first explain what is the issue.
Well, everybody thought that Raghuram Rajan was highly qualified. Yes, he had a PhD from MIT. But he was not an economist. He was a financeman. In economics, the real economics is not microeconomics. That any shopkeeper can tell you. The real economics is macroeconomics. It's a general equilibrium system where if you do something in one sector, it has an effect all through in other sectors. That's why in the Depression, the American president made the mistake of thinking that he could wipe out unemployment by reducing wage rates, by pleading with the trade unions that till the elections are over, his re-election was coming up. And he said, till that time, you accept a 10% cut in your wages. And that 10% cut in wages was followed up by increasing unemployment, because when you cut wages, you also cut purchasing power. And that reduces demand. And therefore, firms which are on the borderline, they start collapsing. And that's how unemployment grows. The same mistake Mr. Raghuram Rajan made, saying that I have to raise interest rates to control inflation. But when you raise interest rates, then the cost of capital for medium and small and medium industries rises, and all of them are on the borderline, and they collapse one after the other. And that is what today's high employment is due to. So all these people who Narendra Modi's government selected had no clue about macroeconomics.
Would you name some of them?
Well, Arvind Subramanian. Then, of course, I already named Raghuram Rajan. The finance minister, Mr. Jaitley, didn't know ABC of economics, neither micro nor macro. Now, and that problem is continuing.
I sort of walked into the trap. I wasn't expecting him to be this forthcoming. But so what is the problem with the current finance minister?
Well, I mean, she's hardly been there. But her approach is now quite clear. It's not a macro approach. And this sudden wiping out of taxes of what, 2.4 crores, lakh crores or something? 1.4 lakh crores. I mean, it's not part of any package. And that means you have no understanding what the real problem is. The real problem is that demand is low. So if you give corporates more money, they can only increase supply. But the demand, the real thing where she should have done it is abolish income tax. That would have raised the demand.
Which is one of his prescriptions. We'll come to that in just a few moments. I just want to read a little bit about what you have said about the current Prime Minister, and this is important. He says, he has immense appeal with the masses and hard-working middle classes, and thus the mandate to carry out major reforms. He's honest in money matters. Lack of academic background has made him dependent on his friends and chosen ruthless ministers who never tell him the bitter truth about the economy or explain the macroeconomics, or that he needs to figure the way out of a crisis. Hence, we have witnessed the folly of demonetization and the inanity of the goods and services tax, both of which have accelerated the tailspin of the economy. So this is the new word that you brought in, and you elaborate on why you called it a tailspin, also in the book. But as the Prime Minister, he's a domineering figure who brooks no political competition. His reliance on unelectable political advisors and colleagues for clues on complex subject of the economy, which they know little about, or even lettered but timid economists appointed by him to posts of huge perks, results in them telling the Prime Minister only that he wants to hear. This is a frightening potpourri for the nation. Now, political leadership is very important. Can you absolve Narendra Modi here? Fine, he has the wrong people. But then if things are not working, he needs to react.
Well, I'll give you the answer first as a politician, then as an economist. As an economist, I have nothing but admiration. He keeps winning elections, and that's what we want.
As a politician.
As a politician, yes. Sorry.
Someone would say now that politics is also a numbers game, so maybe economy comes in there too.
The economy will come in when firms start collapsing, banks starts closing, and factories, start slashing heavily on employment. That stage is at least a few months away if the present trends continue. But he has a rapport with the public, and the public still has a lot of faith in him. And his inability the culture which he has demonstrated already in Gujarat and today, in the last 5.5 years or thereabouts, shows that in the cabinet there is no discussion. It's mostly a kind of a roll call. So how can you blame him in one sense, because nobody is telling him what he needs to know? Take, for instance, demonetization. Actually, in 2014, just over end of 2013 and towards 2014, it was Narendra Modi who told the then president of the party, Gadkari, that you appoint Swamy as a chairman of Strategic Action Committee to tell us what are the things we need to do for once we come to power. And demonetization was recommended by me. But I made conditions that you will have in your stock 6 times the 100 rupee notes that you have today, in new 100 rupee notes. 2, that you will, if you are bringing high denomination notes, new notes, then make sure that the ATMs are designed for that size, or that you repeat the same size, but you have a new note. And 3rd is, tell people that you can deposit your cash in your own bank account. Government will ask no questions, and take away 15% as tax. And you can withdraw 25% of new cash for you, and the rest will be 60% will be in fixed deposit for 5 years.
Yes.
I said there will be no queue. I had said in that time itself there will be no queues, nothing. Now, the finance ministry didn't tell him, the Reserve Bank didn't tell him that they have not printed new notes of the size we want. Then there was no way except to go to banks and stand in a queue and change your cash. And finally, Sri Ravi Shankar asked me, can you give a suggestion in December? And I gave the same suggestion, that you ask people to stop going to banks and deposit in their own account. But it went to the finance ministry, and the finance ministry said government should take 50% of the cash that you give as tax. Now, why would anybody go for that? Because the bank employees were coming privately, informally, and saying, you give us 15% and we'll give you cash delivered at home, you don't have to come.
So it became a scam.
So yeah, it was a scam, but then this was unimplementable. So these are the things where the details of what needs to be done, he's not familiar with, because he's not trained for that.
But Dr. Swamy, in your book, while you are criticizing demonetization and holding it to account for a lot of ills, you in a speech did say that 50% of its objectives had been accomplished. Yes. That was, I think, in Seoul, when you were in South Korea.
Yeah.
Did you jump the gun, or did you think the intent was right, or did you at that time not know that the implementation was as awry as it turned out to be?
I had said, whenever you take a measure, 50% is the shock value. And that shock value was achieved. But the remaining 50%...
You said terror was down. You said...
Yes, that's right. Terror financing had come down very substantially. And in the beginning, the counterfeit notes out of fright was not coming out. But later on, it also came and got recycled through the Reserve Bank and became new legal Indian notes. That's why they're not declaring how much money has been collected.
Let me bring in Dr. M.R. Venkatesh also. Dr. M.R. Venkatesh, many people trace back the problems that we are facing today to the overhang of demo. How much culpability should one, at some level, put place upon the government for this decision? Do you believe it was as much a problem as Dr. Swamy has made it out to be?
What unites me with Dr. Baru is that both of us wrote a book on Dr. Manmohan Singh, where he was charitable and he said accidental Prime Minister, and I said it was a decade of decay when Dr. Manmohan Singh was at the helm of affairs. And I had the pleasure of Dr. Swamy releasing that book to a very tumultuous audience in Chennai. I believe that the current problem has a lot of its roots in the year 2008 to 2014, when 2G started and goes on to devastate a lot of whatever corporate ethics we had. And we became a literal la-la land, where telephone banking in the true sense of the word was flourishing between 2009 and 2012. And you will see the type of corporates, and there is a Credit Suisse report I'm sure all of us who have been in economics, been monitoring, has warned that 10 groups, the biggest 10 groups, barring the Tatas and the Dhirubhai Ambani group, had not got enough profit after operations to pay its interest. So this cycle starts somewhere in the year 2030. But you know what? But this did not hit the small and medium enterprises. And as Dr. Subramanian Swamy says, demo was the proverbial last straw on the camel's back, that an economy which was already floundering could not absorb the shock of demonetization to the extent that it should have been actually revitalizing the economy. And to somebody who practices on the economic criminal law, I know that many of those cases which started with great fervor on black money and on enforcement directorate and Benami law have really not seen the light of the day. At least the public would be happy that I deposited my cash standing 4 hours in the queue, but to see one scoundrel going to jail. But that also has not happened in the true sense. That was one of the objectives of demonetization, which probably you can't blame, even I would say that you can't blame the minister or the Prime Minister. But CBDT and CBIC have a lot of answering to do, that they had the whole data coming out. And if you look at what Mr. Jaitley's budget of 2016 says, he says in one paragraph that I have got roughly 1.45 lakh people depositing somewhere around 5 lakh crores. That's just 1.45 lakh people depositing 5 lakh crores.
Okay.
But what has happened to that? Now we are in 2019. Nothing has happened. So there's a huge amount of bureaucracy which has also acted to ensure that the idea of neutralization, demonetization was neutralized. Let us be very clear about and candid about that.
Okay, so while the intent might have been right, varied factors have led to its failure, which you have explored in your book. But I want to bring in Dr. Baru. Dr. Baru, one of the suggestions, and I'm tying this now with the present situation, that Dr. Subramanian Swamy vociferously argues for is the abolition of income tax. Now, we have seen cuts in the corporate tax announced last week. It has led to some revival of sentiment, at least as far as the markets are concerned. Are you in favor of a very liberal tax regime?
No, I'm certainly in favor of a liberal tax regime, but not the abolition of income tax. I don't agree with Dr. Swamy on that. We are a highly unequal society, and there has to be some fiscal measure by which those who are better off will pay for the welfare of those who are not better off. And the progressive income tax in all modern societies is the basis of such transfer of money, also of citizenship. There is a famous statement, early years of democracy, there is no taxation without representation. But once there is representation, taxation is a way in which citizenship you play a certain obligation.
Sure, one understands that, but distribution of wealth, Dr. Swamy has perhaps presaged that someone would make this point, and he argues, why don't you explain to the audience here, Dr. Swamy, why you don't believe that that is the only way of redistributing income?
See, first of all, income tax is not paid on agricultural income, zero.
So paid.
No. First, let me tell you the actual situation. Income tax is not paid agriculture. Those below the tax limit, they don't pay taxes. The rich have chartered accountants and they will put expenses, exemptions, etc. And in the end, they will hardly pay anything. And if the income tax collector becomes unreasonable, then he's also paid. It's the most corrupt system we have today, the income tax collection system. So it's the middle class, the young entrepreneurs who come with startups and so on, who are harassed. Today, people are shivering that some notice will arrive, and then they will face a hardship. When you can raise money by auctioning 2G spectrum or coal blocks, and you get in lakh crores, what is the difficulty? Today, if you abolish income tax, first of all, the rate of savings will go up. As a consequence, the rate of investment will go up, and that, as a consequence of which the growth rate will go up. And black money, which is mostly going into consumption, because otherwise it will be discovered, that will cease to be. So the goal for which Sanjay Baru is arguing about egalitarianism, that in the present Indian system is not possible through official channels. And I think that's why the Hindus had always said that the highest respect should be given to the poorest but knowledgeable person. The Jnani and Tyagi was placed at the head of the hierarchy. And we are probably the only society where money is not a determinant of your social status, whereas in the United States it is. So I would therefore like to have a system which can be implemented.
Sure.
And not a system which is unimplementable.
Okay, sure. Dr. Baru.
No, but that's fine. It's a system that can be implemented, non-corrupt, agricultural income should be taxed, and remove all these various ways of tax avoidance,
sure,
etc. But the principle of taxation, I'm willing to accept a lower rate of taxation, but the principle of taxation goes back to Kautilya's Arthashastra. Forget about Keynes and modern economics.
That was Satyayug, not
The point is, the idea that it's a responsibility of the state to collect income from those who can afford and provide facilities, infrastructure or services, education, health, etc. for those who cannot afford, is one of the fundamental foundations of liberalism. So I find it very difficult to accept the idea of abolition of income tax. Reform of income tax, reform of the system, make the tax machinery less corrupt and more transparent, or whatever. I mean, I have so far not had the misfortune of being harassed by any taxman. And in the last few years, we find that money comes, you get refund very quickly. So there is some reform happening, and I don't see a problem. And of course, harassment happens, and harassment is a political instrument. Every regime has used the tax man as an instrument against its opponents.
Okay, Doctor.
See, being a chartered accountant, so I think let me have a say on this. There is no tax terrorism in this country. There's only pure, unadulterated tax jihadism. Okay. Now, why do I say this? Today, it's not a question of paying income tax, sir. I am ready to pay 60% also. But the laws are so complicated that I tweeted that whether the finance secretary or the CBDT chairman but they must sit in presence of the Prime Minister and fill their income tax form. Let CBIC chairman come and fill GST 9. Okay. Sir, Tom Cruise is taking a new film, Mission Impossible, based on this idea. That's all I wanted to say.
But given, and I want to explore this just for a few more moments, given the fact that this government hasn't really lived up to its own promise of minimum government, maximum governance, it has extended welfareism even beyond the scope of what the UPA had envisaged. Is this even something that the regime that you are part of, Dr. Swamy, is even willing to contemplate? Such radical thoughts on the tax issue.
Well, there has to be somebody who is to campaign for it. And I don't think anybody wants to do it. And there are elements in our party and even government to think that these instruments are necessary to keep people in discipline. I mean, keeping them in line. I'm using the word discipline and not in a positive sense. It's impossible, in my opinion, today to be rich and not violate the laws. The laws are so complicated. The income tax officials and the...
No, so some people here will say that what you're doing now is creating a justification for the Malyas and others that you have actually gone against. Because they've been forced to perhaps do things.
No. See, the question is, they are not, it's not a question of violation of income tax on their part. They have taken money from the banks and decamped. It's a totally different thing. I would say that I am only talking about the personal income tax.
Okay.
And make it equitous. You can't collect, if tomorrow you have an agriculture income tax, I can tell you all the farmers will beat up the income tax people and nobody will come back alive. So therefore there is no income tax for agriculture. The same thing might happen in the urban sector very soon at the rate which we are going.
Let's talk about this word tailspin that you have referred to.
Yes.
Tell us why we are in this position.
Well, we are in this position because we have not allowed the people of India to venture to take new projects. That is, I'm talking about in entrepreneurs. Take new projects and not pay some kind of tax all the way. And the moment we have tried something alternative, we have ended up doing something much worse, like the GST. It was originally an idea that you pay tax at only one place, the place of final sale.
Yeah.
But then the question became, what about the place of production? So we have to compensate for that. So therefore, we have to have the state not collect income indirect tax, but the center. So we brought a constitutional amendment for it. And then what do you do with the money? You put it first in a bank, and then after that you have a computer program through which you decide which state and which state should get how much of the share of the money that you have collected in aggregate. For that you need a giant software program. And that was entrusted to a private company. It was called GSTN. And you would be surprised that the entire parliament voted for GSTN except one person, namely myself. And I said this GSTN should be nationalized. You can't have ICICI and HDFC in that having a majority share and the government having a minority share in collection of taxes. It's unheard of. Finally, 6 months ago, the Prime Minister agreed and he has nationalized GSTN. Today, everybody, as he says, the forms that they have to fill, it is horrendous. I had one person come from Barmer, Rajasthan, telling me, I've been asked to upload. Ye kya hota hai upload? He says, I don't understand. So I said, you put a computer and then he says, wahan to bijli bhi nahi hai, main kahan computer chalaunga. So see, there has been total lack of thinking on this. This is the problem that has Prime Minister has a lot of ideas, but he should not be encouraged to implement all of them at one stroke. And there are people who are not being fair to him by telling him it can be done. And then later on let him hold the bag.
One of the issues that you also point to is the lack of verifiable data, accurate, authentic data.
Yes.
Now, I want to bring in Dr. Baru on this. Dr. Baru,
I have an anecdote on that after that.
Okay, I just want to read out a little bit of an excerpt from the book. The Finance Ministry has been caught in embarrassing controversy on the veracity of government statistics. It does look like a wild hope that the GDP in mid-2024 will be 5 trillion from the estimated 2.7 trillion in mid-2019 at constant price. It means a 14.4% growth rate annually, and we know that GDP growth rate figures have attracted a lot of controversy. Is this also a fundamental problem? Do you believe that there is fudgery?
You see, I don't want to get into this debate on GDP numbers. It's basically economists who get obsessed with these numbers. There's a larger issue, since it's a general audience we are talking to, there's a larger issue of trust in the government. The fact is that Indian statistics have always been flawed. I don't think anybody will ever say that there was some point in time in the past when the statistics were all 100% accurate.
Sure.
There's a lot of in the manner in which we gather these statistics, there are shadow pricing, there are extrapolations, interpolations, assumptions made, agricultural statistics, employment statistics. Anybody who knows anything about Indian statistics know that these are approximations. But the point is, people trusted these numbers. Not just in India, but internationally, that India was never seen as a country that generated false data, like China was. I mean, Chinese statistics were always questioned whether these were accurate or not, whether this was being fudged. I think for the first time we've had, in the last several years, questions about the accuracy of the data. In my own view, I know several of the individuals involved in the statistical system, the former chief statistician, his predecessor, the current chief statistician. These are all honorable men, highly competent men. I don't think any of them can be accused of fudging data. So I don't think it's a question of individual impropriety. I think the real issue is that the organizations involved in the gathering of data have become increasingly less active, effective. These chaps don't go out into the field and actually collect data. They sit in the office, and fill up for forms. So there's a feeling that the system is not generating adequately reliable statistics.
Okay.
And if the government had responded to this criticism in a manner in which it enthused confidence, it reinvested confidence, I think this whole issue would have been out of the media.
Okay.
But unfortunately, like on so many issues, the reaction of this government has been defensive. On so many issues, the reaction is defensive. I don't think there's any need for a government that has absolute majority in parliament to be defensive about what it does. An assertion of confidence, yes, there's a mistake. We understand there's a mistake, we will sort out the mistake. Instead of saying, no, there's no mistake, and anybody who says there's a mistake is anti-national, I don't accept it.
Okay. Dr. Swamy, you wanted to come in with an anecdote?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not a question of fudging data. It's a question of the conceptual change which is not disclosed. One of the things that happened after we came to power is we shifted the price base from 2004 to 2012.
Yeah.
Now, it's well known in the theory index numbers, and I'm joint author with Paul Samuelson on the most classic paper on index number theory. I can tell you, the simplest thing is that when you change the base from an earlier year to a later year, all estimates start going up. So there is no fudging, but if the country doesn't know that you have changed the base, you are misleading them. This is one. Second, on February 1, 2017, the BJP government decided to introduce the budget on the 1st of February. So they have to bring an economic survey. So an economic survey was brought which said that there is no impact of demonetization on the Indian economy. Coincidentally, the Minister of Planning, Mr. Sadanand Gowda, a good friend of mine, he was Minister of Planning for Minister of Statistics also. And he knew as much statistics as he knew about how to dance Bharatnatyam, that kind of difference. So he requested me to be present in a meeting with the Central Statistical Organization Director about the evaluation of GDP. So first question I asked, and by the way, the Central Statistical Organization was founded by my father. And early years, I had as a boy of 7 or 8 years old, I used to spend hours there because my father used to take me there and keep me there. But I asked the director, you have on the 1st of February produced an economic survey which shows that the GDP is higher than, there has been no decline and therefore there is no impact of it. Tell me one thing. The informal sector, like small and medium industries,
yes,
their estimates come out of an annual survey of the National Sample Survey. And you have produced, the demonetization was in November of 2016. And you produced the estimate on 1st of February in 2017. And you said there's no impact. So I want to ask you, if you produced a thick volume on 1st of February, you must have sent it to the printer on 1st of January. And that means you must have had your paper, the volume written up somewhere in the middle of December. So how could you get an estimate of the impact of demonetization on the economy? So he said, I was under pressure to produce these statistics. So what I did is, I took the 2015 ratio between the informal sector and the formal sector and applied the same ratio to the formal sector in 2016. And that's how I got it. So I said, but that whole thing assumes that there is no change in the informal sector. He said, yes. Then I said, but aren't you misleading the public? He said, I was required to do a job, I did it. So now this is the real question. It's the conceptual changes that have taken place. There's no fudging of data. The conceptual change should be, take again last $5 trillion in 2024.
Yes.
2024, yes. That means, what was it on 5th of May, 5th of May of 2019? It was 2.5 trillion.
Yes.
So that means doubling in 5 years. If you double in 5 years, it is actually a growth rate of 14.4% per year. We are growing now at less than 6%. Can you assume that you will make up enough so that the average for the 5 years will be 14.4% per year? So I was quietly told that the 5 trillion is in current prices. Now that means it includes inflation. So this is again not fudging, but not being told whether it's constant prices, current prices. People don't understand. So nobody asks these questions.
Okay. I just want to ask you finally, Dr. Swamy, you've written all of this, you've put it into a book which I'm sure that a large number of people here should and would look forward to read. But have you ever had exchanges with the Prime Minister over the last few years? I'm sure you've been thinking about these thoughts. Have you been able to present them?
I write Prime Minister's letters on all this. On GSTN, I wrote letters 4 or 5, and he responds by just acknowledging my letter. But I have never taken the trouble to go and take appointment with him and meet him, because I've known him from 1972, and I know there is no point a person like me talking to him on a technical subject. He feels offended, understandably, because he thinks that I am trying to, since my talk will not be, sir, you are a wonderful man, you're doing extremely well. I know him so well that I would talk to him on a first-name basis. So I have written letters continuously.
Well, now you have a reason.
And now I can send him a
Now
book.
you have a reason. You should give it to him personally.
Yes. Well, I'm waiting for him to come back.
Well, there you go. He doesn't mince his words, and he certainly hasn't minced them here. We leave it at that. The floor is open to questions, comments. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
With your permission, sir, a very small question. Much is being said about the economy, the macro and the micro of it. Are we talking enough about the consumer behavior here? As far as demand is concerned, the consumer behavior is a very, very important part of the drivers of demand. Currently, we perhaps love the government and itna bada janadesh hum diya. The dichotomy of the situation is we love the cleanliness of the government. The government is above board. The Prime Minister is above board. The party is perceived to be above board. Also, national security, हम महफूज feel करते हैं. We feel secure. But the dichotomy of the situation is, economically, we are not trusting. I'm not using the word government. We are not ready to spend the money out there. We are not sure if we are going to face another demo, a GST, a package similar to that, variants of that, combos of that, suddenly announced. How do we tackle? RBI has reduced the interest rate 25 basis points on savings account itself. Bulk of our retirees live on that money. And today they are insecure. A lot of their children are still studying, they are insecure. How do we address these insecurities? Cutting down on the corporate tax rates, I'm coming to finally. Cutting down on the corporate tax rate will probably give more money to the corporates if they decide to invest. If they decide to slash the prices. Maruti has slashed the prices by 5,000 rupees. I am not so sure there are going to be so many takers this Deepavali and before that the Dussehra. So the drivers of consumer behavior, there is a fear psychosis. We need to address that. So.
Okay. Well, I couldn't agree more. There is a fear psychosis. There's uncertainty. And the uncertainty comes because whatever has been done has been piecemeal. And it's not a major change. I mean, you may have written off taxes, but the tax system has not changed. So how do I remove the uncertainty in the minds of the people? That question only Prime Minister can answer. I cannot answer because I don't know who to speak to on this issue. But I would say this, that one thing I would say as a politician, not as an economist, that Narasimha Rao produced almost a miracle in 5 years, and the people defeated him. So what the people do, I can't say. They may still vote for us because of national security and fighting corruption, and say, well, doesn't matter, we'll starve, but this is better than what was happening before. So this uncertainty, but that won't make India into a great power. We need to grow at 10% per year. We can't remove unemployment unless that happens. And so maybe India, I mean, I'm going back to our history of last 70 years. Whenever India has got a rude shock, they got up, reformed themselves. When the food crisis came where we had to depend on shiploads from America, that brought green revolution. the near default that we came to in 1990 gave us the opportunity to bring about change in the system and go in for a market system. So maybe this impending crisis, if it gets a little worse, then maybe you will get relief after that.
Okay. Well, that gentleman, keep your questions short, sir. We have 4 more questions after this.
My question is to Dr. Swamy, since I'm a banking person. So I would like to have your views on this recent mergers of various banks. Now the thing is that NPA level is on continuous rise, and that has brought the health of the public sector banks down. Now what is the rationale of these weak banks being amalgamated with the good banks? I think whether the good banks will survive or these weaker banks will bring them down.
Okay. Well, I think we have got more problems than to take on this kind of a bureaucratic exercise. They have not been able to determine, the last thing I heard is that these banks, each of them have branches in the same street. And now which branch will be closed? You can't have 4 branches in the same street of the same bank once it's amalgamated. So it's a horrendous problem, and a lot of people will lose sleep. I think it was a very badly timed decision.
The gentleman there who stood up, yes. No, the one behind you, sir. Sorry. Yes.
Dr. Swamy, I would like to ask, there are so many legacy issues like NPA, like missing link in the manufacturing sectors, corruption, leakages. So you should give the time requires to fill those gaps and move ahead. And the narration at present, people like to try that recession. When we are growing at 5% or 6%, you cannot call it a recession. It's a growth slowdown. But these are the issues that existed and time requires for that activity.
Well, I never called it a recession. We were 8% in the first year. And since then we have been coming down. And now we have told that last estimate was 5.5. I am 100% certain that the next will say 5. Question is to turn that around. And it's no use saying that we are doing better than UPA. The UPA was sent out of power because they felt that we can do better. So the issue is that can these problems be solved? Of course they can be solved. Why are they not being solved? Because people who have to make the decisions don't see it the way I see it. I may be wrong, they may be right, but the results show that I may be right. But they are obviously wrong because these are steps which shouldn't have been taken. So therefore, it's not a question of saying that we are doing better than somebody else or we are doing better than Pakistan. That's another benchmark we can have. We must now become a global economic power, especially because China has run out of its model's usefulness, which was to import semi-processed goods from East Asia and exporting it to add value and selling it to the West. That model has now become exhausted. Infrastructure investment has now become saturated. They are not able to occupy the houses they have built. They are not able to have cars on the highways that they have put across the country. While it was being constructed, it created employment. But today they have to go for a new model. So their growth rate is coming down. This is the time for us to overtake China. And we, in fact, are not. That is the tragedy.
Gentleman here in the front row, last 2 questions.
Legacy is that issue, and that they were doing worse than us. That is not a matter for satisfaction.
Yes.
Get a good chartered accountant.
Okay, the gentleman wearing the tie. Please stand up, sir. The gentleman in the tie and the suit. Yes. There he goes. That's the last question of the evening.
Dr. Subramanian Swamy, your intelligence sometimes impediment. Do you believe in exponential growth or only the growth? I am saying to you here in this meeting that we will go beyond 5 trillion by 2024.
Well, that means you will be growing at 14.4% per year. All right. Well,
we can give you a fact and figure later on when you want.
well, I'll be happy, but at this stage, it is my book which is being discussed, and I'm giving you an explanation. When you write a book, I'll come and be in the audience.
Okay, it's been a, I'm sorry, this will continue and we'll be here half the night, but I'm sorry, I'm just closing the floor because we've run out of time. But thank you for being here in the numbers that you have. Over to you.